Thank you. Hi, Journey. How are we? We doing all right? Yeah? Hey, if you are new here, we've never met before, my name is Brooke. I'm part of the teaching team here, and gosh, I wish it was under different circumstances that I was teaching this weekend, but like Nolan shared, we just saw God's hand and God's timing in all of this, and so that's what makes me excited to get to share what God has for us this weekend. So we're gonna actually start off this morning with a story. I love telling stories. For a good chunk of my life, I was a long distance runner. I've got really bad knees and have had knee surgery, so I can't run anymore. I walk a lot now. But do I have any other long distance runners in the room? Anybody else? I know, we're kind of sick and twisted people. Wait, keep your hands up, raise them up. Okay, yeah, some. There's somebody over there pointing to this person like, she's a weirdo. Okay, so I got into running actually when I was in high school, and I ran track and field. I ran a couple of different events, but my favorite event was the 2-mile race. That was like my baby. That's what I worked for every season. I would train for that, and I had a really awesome coach, Coach Faber, and she just kind of tracked with me. Well, throughout my high school experience, there was always this one girl. She was from Durango High School, our rival high school, and she would always beat me at the 2-mile race, and it bothered me, and I wanted to be number one. And so when my senior year rolled around, I got with my coach before season, and I said, Coach, I want to beat her. I want the number one time. Can you help me train? And she was like, for sure. So before season even started, we started training. And she was awesome. She would meet me early at the track, and we would work on my time, and she would go out on runs with me. And so eventually, season happened. The race against Durango, or the meet, was our very last meet of the season. So I kind of had all season to prep. So race day comes, we get there, I run my other events at the meet, and then eventually the 2-mile race comes. And so we line up, and my coach is sitting on the other side, where the track is. The 2-mile race, by the way, is 8 laps around the track. And so she's sitting on the other side of the fence, and she's there, ready to encourage me and cheer me on. So the race begins. And here was always my strategy whenever I ran the 2-mile race, is I would never get out front right away. I would always let the leader go out in front, and then what I would do is I would come right behind the leader, and I would hang on their shoulder for the whole race, trying to reserve my energy, and then at the very last, basically halfway through the last lap, or 3/4 of the way through the last lap, I would make my move, and I would try to come out in front of that person and get in the lead. So we start off, gal from Durango, she gets out ahead, I come right on her shoulder, and we're cruising along. And when we come around after that first lap, I was feeling so good. I was like, man, all this training has paid off. I feel so good. I have so much left in the tank. This is gonna be an awesome race. I think I might actually do it. We go into lap number 2, and I'm still feeling the same. I'm like, yep, I've got more in the tank. I can totally hang at this pace. I could go at a faster pace, but I'm feeling good at this pace. Lap 3 and lap 4 are similar, but at this point, I do start to feel it. I can feel it in my legs. I'm feeling like I'm having to work harder on my strides, but I'm still feeling pretty good. Then lap 5 and lap 6 hit, and now I'm really feeling it. And this is where I start to waver a little bit. I start to get in my head, and I'm thinking, okay, I feel okay, but one, I don't know that I can keep this pace for 2 to 3 more laps. And not only that, I've got to keep something left in the tank so that I can make my move on that last lap of the race. And I start to get a little bit nervous. Then we come into lap 7, and I'm really feeling it. And when I hit lap 7, this is when I start to question if I'm even going to have any shot at beating this girl. And I'm thinking back over the past 6 months that I have dedicated to training, and kind of this hopelessness starts to set in. Because at this point, I have nothing left in my reserves. I'm like, there is nothing there. I have expended every ounce of energy that I had in this race, and I still have 1 more lap to go. I don't think I'm gonna be able to do this. And so we cross into lap 8. So this is the last lap of the race. And man, talk about a good coach. This is another message for another day. But my coach must have been able to see or know that hopelessness was starting to set in. And remember, she's on the other side of the fence. And so she just starts going crazy, yelling encouragement out to me. She's like, Brooke, you've got this. You've trained for this. You're cruising at a great pace. You can totally win this race. And she's just shouting like encouragement after encouragement after encouragement. And it was exactly what I needed to kind of just give me that boost or that pep in my step. And so I doubled down. I'm like, there was nothing in my reserves, but I'm making up stuff that's in there. And so I'm just working on my stride. I'm focusing on my training. I'm coming back to all the things that my coach has said to me over the past few months. So we're cruising around. We're hitting that 3/4 of the way through the last lap of the race. And this is when it's time for me to make my move. And before I can even start to do it, I hear my coach behind me yelling, Brooke, the time is now. Make your move. You've got it. And so sure enough, I come out in front of the girl, get in front of her, and I'm like, okay, I'm in the lead, but now I've got to hold this lead. And so I am just doing all I can, focusing on every step as I'm putting it down, every stride as I'm making it. We come around to the last, third quarter way through the track. And this is where you just have to leave it all out there because this is the last leg of the race. Now, if you're a long distance runner, you know that there's something called runner's incontinence. Okay? So what happens is, mostly often with marathon runners actually, is you use up so much energy. Your body is using up so much energy that it starts pulling its energy from other areas. One of those areas being your ability to hold your pee in. And so, I know, bet you didn't think you were gonna hear this on a Sunday morning at church, right? Okay, so at this point, I realize, oh my goodness, I am peeing my pants right now, and I cannot stop myself from peeing my pants. The men's group, by the way, did not get this story to start the message off with. So, and I'm in high school. I've got friends in the stands. I've got a boy that I'm crushing on in the stands, and I know if I cross that finish line, I'm gonna go see them, and they're all gonna see that I've peed my pants. Now, ironically, right when I realize I'm peeing my pants, right off to my right is this gate to a fence on the track, and that gate leads you right over to the bathroom. And so I have this split-second decision to make. Do I finish the race, peed pants and all, or do I just quietly excuse myself from the race, go off to the bathroom, and then figure out how to call somebody over there to change my pants? What do you think I did? I finished the race! Yeah! I finished the race. Man, last week, Napoleon Dynamite, I kind of feel like Uncle Rico right now, telling about my high school glory days. I finished the race. I won the race, peed pants and all. Yeah! My coach came, she met me at the finish line. She came running on the track, and she's like hugging me, and she's like, you did it, Brooke, all of that training, you did it, you know? And then eventually when she comes down, I'm like, Coach, and she's like, what? And I'm like, I peed my pants. And she, no joke, she goes, oh yeah, that can happen. I'm like, you could have told me this, what the heck? All right, so my stories do have a purpose, I promise you. So I share this story this morning because what I want to talk about is something that a lot of us experience over the course of our lives, and it's what I'm calling long-distance seasons of life. Long-distance seasons of life. Most everybody here in this room has walked through a long-distance season of life, and if you haven't, you will at some point over the course of your life. I'm talking about seasons like an ongoing health crisis, an addiction, or walking alongside somebody who is battling an addiction. Body image struggles, eating disorders, infidelity in your marriage or struggles in your marriage, divorce, separation, family tension, infertility, battling a mental health disorder, depression, anxiety, a child who is struggling in life and you are seeking to parent them in a way into fruition and goodness, an absent or a deployed spouse, grief or loss. There are these seasons right, that we go through in life that can feel a little like a long distance race, like a marathon. They last longer than we think they should, longer than we want them to, longer than we thought we had the strength or the capacity for. That's what a long distance season of life is. And here's usually how these seasons go. So something typically happens that triggers us into one of these seasons, right? A relapse, or you get fired, or you get some kind of news from somebody. And then usually when we kind of enter into these long distance seasons, at least after the initial shock or the devastation wears off, what can happen is we can actually start off feeling okay or strong about these seasons. Like we put our head down, we check ourselves into a program, or we get resources or help that we need, and we say, okay, I can do this. I'm gonna rally my troops and I can do this. And we kind of put our head down and we start chugging along, sort of like lap 1 and 2 of the race. We feel okay. We're feeling it, but we feel okay. We've got stuff left in there. But then the season keeps going, right? The healing isn't coming. It's taking longer than we thought it should or would. Maybe even things feel like they get worse before they get better. We aren't seeing the progress or the results that we were hoping to see. And this is when we start to waver a little bit. This is when we start to question, gosh, am I gonna make it through this? How am I gonna make it through this? This is sort of like lap 5 and 6 in the race. But then the season continues, right? And not only is the season not over, but at points in our long distance seasons, we can't even see the finish line. Talk about a light on a horizon, we see no light. Things feel like they are going on. And this is where that sense of kind of hopelessness or dread can set in. And we start to entertain those questions like, should I bow out? Man, I've been praying about this for so long, and I'm not seeing the results that I thought I should be seeing. Should I stop praying? Should I pull back? Should I stop hoping? Sort of like that last lap of the race. Have you ever been in a season like this? Are you in a season like this morning? Well, the question that I want to seek to answer this morning is, how do we make it through these long distance seasons of life? How do we navigate through them? Is there a way to get through them? Is there a way to go through these long distance seasons in such a way that they don't destroy us or completely take us out? Those are the questions that I want to be addressing this morning. Well, part of the answer to some of those questions of how do we navigate through these long distance seasons can actually be found in one particular word, which I know seems overly simple, but hang with me here. So this word is not really a word that we use on a regular basis. In fact, it's a word we've kind of just forgotten about. We've almost written it out of our modern day English language. But if you pull up one of the older versions of the Bible, like the King James version of the Bible, and you start flipping through it, or you go to the back and you look this word up, you're gonna see that the Bible is covered with this word. It's not just that we don't use this or we don't need this word anymore. No. This word is actually vital to the Christian life, vital to how we are meant to go through these long distance seasons of life. Do you guys want to know what the word is? Long-suffering. Long-suffering. That's the word. I brought some props with me today. So in a nutshell, because that word, again, we don't use it on a regular basis, right? So we're not totally familiar with, well, what does that really mean? We've heard that word before. Everybody's heard that word before. But what does it really mean? So what it means is it's this space in between our current, often difficult circumstances and the promises of God. Long-suffering, what long-suffering is the space in between our current difficult circumstances and the promises of God. To long-suffer means to exist in this in-between space. Now, a few clarifications. When I say promises of God, I am not talking about blanket feel-good statements like everything's gonna be okay, or my least favorite, everything happens for a reason. That's not what I'm talking about when I say promises of God. When I'm talking about promises of God, I mean actual promises that the God of the universe makes to us and we find in Scripture. One of the promises I cling to in my life is Romans 8:28, where God says, hey, everything you go through, I am going to use for good in your life. So that's what I mean when I'm saying promises of God. So to long suffer means to live in this in-between space where those promises have not yet been fulfilled. The complete healing hasn't quite come yet. We haven't experienced the freedom or the breakthrough or the victory that God has promised to us yet. And we are living life in this in-between space between our current difficult circumstances and the not yet fulfilled promises of God. This is what long suffering is. And so what we're gonna do this morning is we're gonna talk about this in-between space, this long distance, this long suffering space. And to do that, we're gonna look at the life of a guy who knew what it was like to live this word long suffering out. We're gonna be in a book of the Bible that I actually haven't heard another sermon on before. I'm sure there are sermons out there, but we're gonna be in the book of Habakkuk in the Bible. It's kind of a unique book. I'm in love with this book now. And we're gonna actually go through the entire book of Habakkuk. Don't worry, it's only 3 chapters. We're not gonna read word for word. Sigh of relief. But we're gonna go through this entire book. And my hope is that you will leave this morning with a good gist of what this book is all about. Now, before we start reading, I want to give a little background onto what this book is all about and who this guy Habakkuk was. So he was a prophet. We actually don't know a whole lot about this guy's life other than he was a prophet. Now, when we hear prophet, what I want you to hear is a messenger for God. They're not fortune tellers, okay? They are hearing a message from God, and they are tasked with delivering that message to God's people. So that's who Habakkuk was. Now, what's interesting is there's a lot of books in the Bible that are of prophets. There's a lot of prophets, right, that we read about. We've got Isaiah, we've got Jeremiah. Those are prophets. And when we read those prophets' books, they read like an announcement, like it's a person giving an announcement to God's people. But the book of Habakkuk is drastically different from the other prophets' books in the Bible. When you read Habakkuk, it actually reads more like a prayer journal. What we get in this book is this really intimate exchange happening between the prophet and God. He does have a message. Habakkuk does have a message for the people of God. But we get this up close, intimate exchange happening between these two. And then when we look at what God and Habakkuk were dialoguing about, we're gonna see that it had a lot to do with long suffering. Okay, so that's our background for this book and this guy. We're gonna jump in right in chapter 1, and here, right out the gate, we find Habakkuk, and he is dialoguing with God about being tired and worn out from the violence and the sin and the oppression and the suffering that he and the people of God are undergoing in this season. There was a group of people that were following God, and they were living under the oppression of this incredibly corrupt and cruel and evil king. And Habakkuk was worn out from being under that king's rule. And so in Habakkuk 1:2, again, very beginning of the book, he cries out to God and he says, "How long, Lord, have I called for help and you do not hear? I cry out to you violence, yet you do not save. Why do you make me see disaster and make me look at destitution? Yes, devastation and violence are before me. Strife exists and contention arises." So Habakkuk's just like pouring out his weary soul here. He is tired from being in this long distance season of seeing this injustice happening to him and his people, and he's crying out to God, how long? How long? And I wonder if some of you here in the room can relate to Habakkuk's cry here. How long, O Lord, must my child continue to suffer? How long, O Lord, must I continue to battle with this struggle in my life? How long, O Lord, must this illness continue to go on and on? How long, O Lord? And then insert your long distance season there. How long, O Lord? Well, after Habakkuk cries out to God, remember we see this dialogue happening. God responds to Habakkuk, but God responds not with the answer that Habakkuk was probably hoping for or wanting. Instead, God responds by telling him that God is raising up this other evil group of people, depending on which translation, either the Babylonians or the Chaldeans. Long story, different message for a different day, but same group of people. That this other evil group of people is actually going to rise up and they're going to take over the current corrupt and evil king oppressing the people of God. And the people of God's oppression and suffering is going to continue. Habakkuk 1:6, God says, "For behold, I am raising up the Chaldeans, that grim and impetuous people who march throughout the earth to take possession of dwelling places that are not theirs." Man, and some of us in here know what this is like too. You cry out to God asking for relief from the long distance season of life that you're in, and what comes next feels even worse, or even more difficult, or even more tiring, or even more painful. Well, let's see how Habakkuk responds back to God. And I love his response here because, as you're going to see in just a minute, it is so honest. It is not the response that I would think a good prophet would give to God. Habakkuk just responds in this really raw and honest place back to God. Chapter 1, verse 12, Habakkuk says, "O Lord, you have appointed them to execute judgment. O rock, you have ordained them to punish. Your eyes are too pure to look on evil. You cannot tolerate wrong. Why then do you tolerate the treacherous? Why are you silent while the wicked swallow up those more righteous than themselves?" Gosh, some of you in here I know, and I'll be the first to raise my hand, get Habakkuk's response here. You're in this long distance season. It gets worse before it gets better, and you almost find yourself throwing your hands up in confusion and saying, "God, do you see me? Do you know what I'm going through? Do you know what my loved one is going through? Because this cannot be right. This cannot be what you planned for, right, God?" We get to this place where we're confused and we're upside down trying to make sense of the ongoing pain or the suffering in our life. Now, I think what happens for all of us, whether we're conscious of this or not, when we get to this point in our long distance season, when things get worse before they get better, or they're just really hard and really grueling, I think we sort of find ourselves at a fork in the road. Again, maybe not consciously, but we start to kind of question, do I keep going on the path that I'm going on? Do I keep plugging into God? Do I keep praying about this? Do I keep hoping that God is going to come through for me? Or do I bow out? Do I just kind of stop praying about this? Do I try to take this into my own hands and solve this on my own? Do I pull back? Do I stop hoping? We come to this fork in the road. Well, I want us to see, because Habakkuk comes to that fork in the road, and I want us to see which path he chooses. Now, this is just after Habakkuk has laid out his confusion to God, but before God has the answer for him. Okay, so God has not responded to his confusion. Habakkuk chooses which path he's going to take on this road. It says this, chapter 2, verse 1. He says, I will stand at my watch and station myself on the rampart. Some translations will say a watchtower. I will stand at my watch and station myself on the ramparts. I will look to see what he, meaning God, will say to me and what answer I am to give to this complaint. Now, this is really interesting because what Habakkuk decides to do is, right, he's living in this valley where all of the suffering and all of the oppression is taking place. He's seeing horrible things happening in this valley. And what he does is he removes himself from that valley and he goes up to this strategic observation point where he can see the valley, but he's not in the valley. He goes up to a watchtower. And what does he do in this watchtower? He's not going up here to escape the evil or escape the oppression or the suffering. No, he's going up here, as scripture tells us, to wait on God and what God will say to him. He goes up to wait on God. I will look to see what God will say to me and what answer I am to give to this complaint. So he gets away to this quiet place and he waits on God to answer. If you look up the name Habakkuk, you can get a couple of different definitions for what the name means. One meaning for Habakkuk is to wrestle. This is a fill-in. One meaning for his name is to wrestle, and the other is to embrace. To wrestle and to embrace. Now, we can see some similarities in those, but in a sense, these meanings almost feel conflicting. At least they do for me. To wrestle and to embrace. There's wrestling, I think of like I'm kind of going against you, right? Embracing, I'm kind of like holding on to, I'm clinging tightly to you. And I actually think there's no mistake that there's this tension in this guy's name. Because what Habakkuk shows us poignantly throughout this book is that it is okay to wrestle out our confusions and doubts with God, but we are meant to do so in the embrace of God. Habakkuk shows us it is okay to wrestle. It is okay to question, to ask how long, how much longer, to cry out, I want this season to end. I'm so sad that the season is not ending yet. It is okay to wrestle out those confusions with God, but we are meant to do so in the embrace of God, with God. Not at God, not distant from God, but with God, to wrestle and to embrace. That's what Habakkuk means. You see, some of us, we've been in this long distance season and we're confused and we're doubting, but what we've been doing is we've been distancing ourselves from God, hurling almost these like prove it statements at God, not bringing them to God. Not letting ourselves be in the embrace of God while we are wrestling out this confusion. This is not the way we are meant to wrestle. Listen, you guys, hear me. Your wrestling is okay, but do it with God. Don't do it by yourself. Don't just go to other people to wrestle out your confusion. Go to God. Wrestle out your confusion with God, and this is exactly what we see Habakkuk do. He just pours out his confusion. Then he goes up, right, to this watchtower and he waits on God. Here it is, God. Here's all the things I'm doubting. Now I'm waiting on your word. I'm waiting on what you're going to say to me. Let's see how God responds. So Habakkuk 2, verses 2-3 says this. Then the Lord replied, write down the revelation and make it plain on tablets so that a herald may run with it. In other words, God is saying, hey, you're waiting for the word. This is it. Grab your pen, write it down. God goes on. For the revelation awaits an appointed time. It speaks of the end and will not prove false. When it says it speaks of the end, meaning the message that God has for Habakkuk here and for the people of God, it has something to do with the end of this long distance season. And here's the message, the word that God has for the people of God. Though it linger, wait for it. It will certainly come and will not delay. Though it linger, wait for it. Here is what God is telling Habakkuk to do here. Though the end to your season is lingering, Though you're not quite there yet, though relief hasn't come yet and healing hasn't come yet and the promises have not been fulfilled yet, wait for it, Habakkuk. It is coming. I am on the way. I have not lost sight of you. Wait for it. Though it lingers, wait for it. What God is telling Habakkuk to do here and the people of God to do here is to long suffer. To long suffer, to live, to exist in this in-between space from our current difficult circumstances and the not yet fulfilled promises of God. Hold here and wait for God to move. God's coming. Wait for it. Don't fight your way out of this season. Don't fix your way out of this season. Don't take matters into your own hands. Where else can we go? We wait on God. Though it's lingering, we wait on God. Many of you know this, but when the Bible was originally written, it wasn't written in English. A lot of the Old Testament was written in Hebrew, some Aramaic. A lot of the New Testament was written in Greek. And what we'll do here a lot at Journey is we'll give you the original Greek or Hebrew word, not to show how smart we are, although maybe that's what we want to do. But no, it's because what can happen is the meaning of these words can get lost in translation. So we don't quite understand them because the meaning has gotten lost in translation. And so the Greek word for long-suffering, again, we find all over, especially the New Testament of the Bible. You're going to find this word all over the New Testament. The Greek word for long-suffering, and it's the same idea that God is getting at when he tells Habakkuk and the people of God to wait for it, is this word makrothumia. Makrothumia. And if you break that word down, you guys are smart, you can get that first word for sure. Macro, big, huge, lengthy. And then thumia, which means passion. And so what you get as understanding, definition for the word long-suffering is this idea of having a lengthy passion. Being long-spirited, not losing heart, persevering bravely, having a long endurance in trials or misfortunes. That's what long-suffering means. There's this one definition for macrothumia that I came across when I was studying that word, and it was this idea of being long-fused. Long-fusedness. We all know what short-fused people are like, right? Right? They crack under pressure, right? They erupt easily. That's a short-fused person. But long-fused people, well, they sustain over time. They have this long-lasting sort of endurance. And this is what long-suffering looks like. It's this staying sort of power. What God is telling Habakkuk and the people of God to do. Years ago, when I was first falling in love with this book, and I read that definition for macrothumia of being long-fused, I marched myself into Home Depot because I didn't know about fuses. And I had this aching question of, well, why would you choose a short fuse versus a long fuse? What makes somebody choose a different kind of fuse? And so poor Home Depot man got all of my excited energy. But I was cornered him in the Home Depot aisle, electrical area. And I was like, hey, I want to understand fuses. He's like, okay, lady. I'm like, what would make somebody choose a short fuse versus a long fuse? And I actually wrote down his answer because it just hit so home to the book of Habakkuk and this idea of long suffering. He said this, and he put it so simply. He was like, well, the longer the fuse, the greater the power that's going to surge through it. And then I started thinking about that and God's call to us in long-distance seasons to long suffer. And I thought, gosh, the longer the fuse, the more we are able to long suffer, to wait on God, well, the greater the power of God is going to surge through us. The longer the fuse, the more we are able to long suffer, the greater the power of God surging through us. So Habakkuk, right, he cries out from this long-distance season. He's confused. He wants it to be over. Then he chooses to wait on God. He goes up to that watchtower, and God's answer to him is, though it's lingering, wait for it. Hold the line. Wait for me to move. For those of us in here who are in a long-distance season of life, the answer that God is giving to Habakkuk and the people of God then is the same answer he's giving to us. That though it lingers, wait for it. Wait on me, God says. Wait on me to move. I'm on the way. I'm coming. But wait on me. Now, if you're anything like me, when you're in the middle of a long-distance season of life, the last thing you probably want to hear is to wait, to hold in this long-distance season. In fact, when we hear that this is God's answer to them, I don't know if you felt this way, but I'm like, gosh, that feels more like a curse than a blessing. That's the answer? I don't want that to be the answer. But is it? Is it a curse? You see, in God's economy, we talk all the time here at Journey about how God's economy is different from our economy. It's like upside down, right? And in God's economy, long-suffering, existing in this in-between space, does serve a purpose. God does something worthy here in this in-between space. Now, God does not negate the fact that this space is hard. We're not going to negate the fact that this space is hard. God feels our pain with us. The cross is a great example of long-suffering. Jesus knows how hard the in-between suffering space is. So God's not negating that fact, that it's hard and difficult, but God also knows that that is not all these seasons are. They are not only hard and difficult, there is more to these seasons, a greater good and a greater purpose that God is working out in these seasons. Let me tell you some of these good things. First, we're told, if you flip back to the Old Testament and you're in the book of Exodus, God is actually speaking to the people who God is. Straight from the horse's mouth. God's listing out who God is. And one of the characteristics that God lists out for who God is long-suffering. Which means that when we long-suffer, when we wait on God in this in-between space, we are actually taking on the shape and form of God. We are reflecting God out into the world. You are like God when you long-suffer. We're also told in Galatians 5, this is where Paul, he's listing out all these ways that you can know that somebody is living by the Spirit. We call it fruits of the Spirit, right? And we love a lot of these, like love and joy and peace. But one of the fruits of the Spirit, proof that you can tell that you are living by the Spirit, is long-suffering. We've translated it now to patience, but it's long-suffering. So long-suffering has a purpose. There's something worthy done in the long-suffering space. Is it hard? Absolutely. But that's not all that it is. There's so much more. Okay, we're going to finish the message getting a little bit more practical. You might be saying, okay, Brooke, when I'm in these long-distance seasons, I'm not going to fight my way out of them. God's calling me to wait for God, to wait on God to move. What if I have nothing left in my tank? What if I've got no reserves left? I was at the end of my rope months ago, maybe a year ago. What do I do here? Well, there's 3 practices, things that you can do to long suffer, to hold this space when you have nothing left. So number 1, the first practice is you stay connected to God. You stay connected to God. Remember, we're told that long suffering is a fruit of the Spirit, which means you don't produce long suffering in you. Do you know how a fruit grows on the vine or on the tree? It doesn't work really hard to grow, and that's how it grows. No, the fruit's only job is to stay connected to the vine, stay connected to the tree. So that's what we need to do. Practically speaking, we got to be talking to God all throughout our days as we're in all the time, but especially as we're in these long distance seasons. God, help me. I don't have the energy for this meeting. I don't have the energy to see this person. I don't have the energy for this conversation. God, I need you to fill me. I need you to sustain me. I need you to pump your nourishment into me so that I can hold in this long-suffering space. We've got to stay connected to God. Like we see Habakkuk 2, get away with God. Go to a quiet place with God. Get out of the suffering and the oppression going on in your life. Get away to a quiet place and let God speak to you there. We say all the time here at Journey, these are Ed's words, a word from God changes everything. Go seek a word from God. Follow Habakkuk. Wait on God. Okay, so that's the first practice. Second practice, we actually find in Habakkuk 3. So in chapter 3, last book of Habakkuk, it just goes verse by verse, remembering all that God does or has done over the course of history. It's kind of done in a poetic way, but if you read, it's just verse by verse recounting all of the ways that God has come through, that the promise has been fulfilled. Verse by verse, Habakkuk just goes on remembering God's faithfulness. We got to do this too. When we can't see the finish line, when things look dark and hopeless, we need to look back and say, God, how did you come through for me before? And if you don't have many ways, gosh, I know so many of your stories in here, go find somebody else and say, can you tell me a way that God has come through for you? I need to be reminded of God's faithfulness. Can you tell me a way where it looked like there was no end in sight and God came through for you? So that's the second way. We need to remember God's faithfulness. And then the third and final practice for how we long suffer, we also find in that last chapter of the book, and it's this: we worship as our fuel. We worship as our fuel. Chapter 3 isn't written not like chapter 1 and 2, and it's not written like a lot of other chapters in the Bible. In fact, if you get to the end of chapter 3 in Habakkuk, it says, for the director of music on my stringed instruments. We see that a lot in the book of Psalms. Chapter 3 was written to be sung. It was written as a worship song. And so when God tells Habakkuk to wait for it, though it's lingering, to wait for it, he responds by worshiping God. I'm inferring here, but I don't know that Habakkuk felt like worshiping God. Sometimes we don't always feel like worshiping God, but it fuels us when we do. Listen, things shift in the atmosphere when we worship and praise God. We too need to worship God in this in-between space. Habakkuk 3:17-19 says this. This is one of the greatest displays of faith and trust in God I think you're going to find in the Bible. He says this: though the fig tree does not bud and there are no grapes on the vines, though the olive crop fails and the fields produce no food, though there are no sheep in the pen and no cattle in the stalls, yet I will rejoice in the Lord. I will be joyful in God my Savior. The sovereign Lord is my strength. He makes my feet like the feet of a deer. He enables me to tread on the heights. For the director of music on my stringed instruments. We've got to worship as our fuel. So this is how we wait for it, you guys. This is how we exist in this trying, difficult, often painful, in-between space. This is how we wait on God. Right? We stay connected to God. We remember God's faithfulness, and we worship as our fuel. Will you guys stand with me to pray? God, thank you that you are a long-suffering God. You're not asking us to do something that you yourself haven't gone before and let us in. So thank you, God. And God, I lift up especially the people here and those online that are walking through a long distance season of their life, limping through a long distance season of their life. God, like oil poured over their heads, will you just download a special sense of power and love on these people? Will you lift them on wings like eagles? Will you lift them up? God, you tell us in Psalm 3 that you are the one who lifts our head when we are weak and weary. So will you lift our heads, lift our chins, help us to see your gaze upon us, because your eye has always been on us. Help us to stay in this in-between space, trusting that you are on the way, that you are moving even though we can't see it, that you are working something good in our life. We love you, God. And Jesus, we thank you. We thank you that you model this to us. We love you and we worship you, and we pray all of these things in your name, Jesus. Amen. We're going to head into a time of worship, and I encourage you to use that as your fuel for the long distance season. Sing the words even if you don't feel the words, and let that fuel you in this time. Let's worship together.